Good evening. My name is Willard Hunter, and the phantom voice. And I am a member of St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, and it is a great pleasure for me and the organizers tonight to welcome you to this, what I consider a very important evening. If you need to use the restroom, they are down the hall to the left. So that's very simple. And we're going to hopefully have discussion maybe for about 45 minutes, and then we want to leave a lot of time for Q&A because this topic generates a lot of questions. So with the questions we need to, what we'd really like is you to ask questions. We don't want 10-minute lectures. We don't want 10-minute diatribes. And there are lots of diatribes possible with this topic, and we're not encouraging that tonight. We really have a special opportunity with these two men. And Charles, as soon as I go back, I'm going to turn on your mic, and you can briefly introduce them. Again, welcome for coming. Welcome to.
Thanks, Willard. Thank you for coming. I believe this is a very important topic that should get a lot more attention than it does. I learned about it several years ago at a Veterans for Peace national convention where a documentary was shown. And when I realized that next year, 2017, will make it 50 years since the incident, since the attack on the USS Liberty, I brought it up with my chapter that we should do something to commemorate that anniversary. But then we heard about the Survivors Tour, where some of the survivors, and I don't believe there are that many of them, that have been wanting to tell their story, have begun to travel around the country to educate the public about what happened on that day. I heard about it. Friends of Sabeel got involved, and Veterans for Peace quickly signed on. So I want to thank Friends of Sabeel and other organizations that agreed that this was important enough to have this event tonight. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our special guests, and then I'll leave it up to them to do their presentation, and then that will be followed by a question and answer session. To my right is Dave Gahary. He's a radio host, movie producer, and author. Also a veteran that served on the Navy USS Skate, which I'm sure Ken probably had heard of, but I hadn't heard of that particular ship. And he wanted me to mention that he's a married father of 3 sons. And to my left is Phil Tourney. He's the only 3-time president of the USS Liberty Veterans Association. And he's been on this trail of truth for over 30 years, telling his story to anyone that would listen. He's the author of 2 books. The first one was What I Saw That Day. And the one that's available here tonight is Erasing the Liberty. And he'll be glad to sign the copy if you purchase a copy tonight. But without any further delay, I'll leave it up to them to make their presentation.
Well, folks, I'm going to stand up. And first of all, I want to thank you, sir, for your service to this great country. And the honor of meeting you today is special to David and myself and all of you. And all the vets in here, if there's any vets in here, please stand up. A good many vets. And I notice this gentleman here has a Purple Heart hat on, so he knows the horrors of combat. And a special thank you, sir, for your service to this great nation. Thank you very much. And to all others that have given us the honor of being before you to get the real truth out about the USS Liberty is very heartening to us, because that is our journey, and it's been my journey for a lot of years, over 30 years. I've spoken at many different events. I've been in colleges, Virginia Tech, and just all over. Fort Collins, Colorado, CU. There are actually so many, I don't even remember. I'm getting old. I'm almost 70 now, so you got to forgive me. But it is always enlightening to be in front of a group that doesn't have to agree with everything. You know, we can all agree to disagree. But I want to tell you, this book I'm going to be telling you about, Erasing the Liberty, in my view, is the most outstanding, comprehensive, factual book ever written about the USS Liberty. This is a year in the making of great study, great sacrifice, and great honor to do this book. In 50 years, seems like a long time ago if you're young. 50 years is a lifetime. But I joined the Navy in 1964, just, you know, World War II was just over, and the horrors of that war was still reminded in our minds what was going on and so forth. But we learned very quickly how the powers that be in the government will tell you untruths. And it could be about anything. It could be about the water in this country, if it's clean or not. It could be about bills that go through that were supposed to go through and didn't go through, and they fought for and they really didn't fight for. But it all boils down to who runs this country. And the power of the purse is in the hands of the Congress, and they write the checks. So that's kind of where it ends up with who controls the system. It's not really the President of the United States. It is the Congress, because they do write the checks. And I'm going to get off just a little bit of a topic here. I wanted to thank Armin back here, and way back here, for inviting us into his home last night. And I should have told Armin that I was deathly allergic to cats. Because when we got in his lovely home, I was there about 10 minutes, and I says, man, I got to go. So Dave found us a place to go, and so it was, I got over my fit, thank God, and I'm so happy to be here with you. Now, back to the main subject. Our ship was in international waters June 8, 1967, doing what our government had ordered us to do. And our normal operating hours or tours was going up and down the coast of Africa and stopping occasionally in ports to pick up supplies and so on and so forth. But the USS Liberty was the most sophisticated intelligence ship in the world, the very most intelligent ship in the world. We could bounce signals off the moon within seconds back to Fort Meade, Maryland, or Hawaii, when the two antennae met together and they hit simultaneously, so it was a second and a half, they would have real live information about what was going on. And that was our job there, is to find out what was going on. We were in international waters. We got there on the 8th day of June, 1967. We really got on station on the 7th. Our ship was reconned many, many times by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, using slow-flying maneuverable jets. Some of them were Cessnas. And the largest one was what should they call a flying boxcar, but there's a different name for it, Nor Atlas. So the pilots would fly so low that we could see the pilots, and they could see us, and we waved at them. And to be honest with you folks, we wanted the Arabs to get their asses kicked by our best friends, the Israelis. Because I've heard about the horrors of World War II from my father and my uncle and others that fought in World War II and helped liberate the concentration camps and the other camps that held prisoners, American prisoners, and so on and so forth, which my uncle was captured in 1942. He jumped out of an airplane, landed in a tree, and spent the rest of the time in the war in a prison camp. So my family has been very involved in protecting this country. In fact, one of my sons fought in Afghanistan and is going blind over his injuries suffered in that horrible war. And for what? Iraq was a war for what? All those men are dead for what? So that goes back right to the USS Liberty. It benefited one country and one country only. It didn't benefit the United States of America. It benefited Israel. That is a fact. Now, I'm not here to pick on Israel or pick on Jews, but facts are facts. And that's what this book tells you about, are the facts. And this book is unusual in the way that we have survivors just telling their story too, not just my story, but their story. And my first book wasn't quite like that. It was my memoirs of that day aboard the USS Liberty, before, during, and after. Now, I got aboard the USS Liberty in 1965, and I stayed with her through the attack, stayed with her through Malta, and then brought her home to the United States of America. In the meantime, when we were being attacked, the United States government recalled rescue aircraft that were sent to come to our aid from the USS America and USS Saratoga. Not once, but twice. Once from McNamara, once from Johnson. And this was also confirmed by Admiral Geis. He was the commander of the Sixth Fleet, and Admiral Martin. He was a three-star admiral. Admiral Geis was a vice admiral. And they were ordered never, never, never to make sure that we got help. Now, this attack lasted about as long as the attack on Pearl Harbor. Some say a few minutes more, some say a few minutes less. It makes no difference. The damage was done. 34 American sailors and Marines and National Security Agency people were slaughtered, blown to bits. 174 others were wounded, including myself. 70% of the crew was either dead or wounded. As we lay dead in the water waiting for help, we got none. The Israelis, once they got done with their aircraft, they sent torpedo boats in after us, because we had no idea who was attacking us because they were unmarked jet aircraft. We had no idea. We thought it was Arabs. We finally got a message out 15 to 20 minutes after the attack started, because they hit every antenna aboard the ship, all of them. And we couldn't get any messages out. Also, as the attacking jets were coming over our ship, they were buzzsawing anything that would possibly come out of the Liberty, where you couldn't, it was called garbled. So the only thing, when we did get an antenna hooked up, we would have to get messages out with very few words within seconds, because they buzzsawed all the messages. Now, how did they know our frequencies on that most secret spy ship in the world? Somebody gave them to them. So after the airplanes got done with us, here comes the torpedo boats. Then we finally figure out who was attacking us. It was the state of Israel, which we thought were coming to help us to run off the jet aircraft. That moment only lasted a moment. The torpedo boats got in a launch attitude to launch torpedoes. They launched 5 torpedoes at us at one time. One of them hit the starboard side and instantly blew to bits 25 of America's bravest national security agency people. The men that were as ship's company as I was, we took care of these guys. We took them wherever they wanted to go and made sure that they were taken care of, and so on and so forth, because they were the bulk of the ship. That was our mission. I remember the flag flying, and it was shot down once, not twice. And then it was shot down twice. Then we put the holiday colors, which was 7 by 13, the largest flag we had aboard the ship. Now, I remind you again, hours before this attack, the Israelis knew who they were attacking. The United States knew they were attacking a United States flagship. And folks, the things you have to remember is when you attack the red, white, and blue, I don't care what part of the world you're in, you're attacking all of us. Every single one of us in this room, everybody outside, and everybody that lives in America, they weren't just attacking us, they were attacking our way of life and getting by with it. When it was all said and done, in this almost 2-hour attack, there were over 850 cannon and rocket holes in the ship. For example, this one here, I personally cut off out of the bridge. You can see the napalm, how it's all burned up. And there were 850 of these just like this, some much larger. The napalm was dropped on our ship to make sure that they could burn us alive, and they almost did. Napalm is a very, very ugly way to die. as all death is under combat. But that is also against the Geneva Conventions to do what they did to us. The torpedo boats would circle the ship constantly, shooting at our firefighters and stretcher bearers with no regard for human life. None. We're their friends. We're the ones that gave them the money. And we wanted them to slaughter the Arabs. Little did I know, I was a 20-year-old kid put in charge of damage control forward, repair locker forward. When our chief was hit, I had to take over that position. And it wasn't by my choice, but I did fulfill my duties as the rest of the crewmen aboard the Liberty did. God bless them all. The key part of this story is worse than the attack is the cover-up. It started immediately after the attack. Within minutes, they said Israel apologized, all was good. They mistook us for a all worn-out Egyptian horse transport, the El Quasir, that was half sunk in some port. I think it was in El Arish, somewhere like that. And then they called our ship a destroyer that was doing about 38 knots in the water. Had to be an enemy ship firing on their soldiers on the beach. Total lies. We had 450 caliber machine guns that were taken out on the first strafing. Two of my dearest friends were blown to bits in the starboard gun mount that I had just left 1 minute before the attack started, or I wouldn't be here right now. So God was on my side. I'm here for a reason, to tell the truth. I took an oath when I joined the United States Navy to protect and honor the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Just because I'm out of the military does not take that obligation away from me. It gives me more inspiration to make sure people like you understand it and spread the word and make sure this horrible, horrible act of war and war crimes never happens again. Many lives have been ruined by this. The families, the little kids that didn't get to see their daddy come home. It's just a disgusting act of war and war crimes that continues on to this day from the LBJ period to the Obama administration and all their minions in between that will not take on the ADL or APAC for fear of not being reelected again. Because if you do not get the blessing of those groups, you're not going to get elected, because they'll pour money into the other side. That we've had people try to help us, such as Paul Finley, a very famous author and a great, great congressman. Pete McCluskey, Adlai Stevenson, and others were run out of office because they wanted to help us. So that's how powerful the group, the lobby, the tribe, whatever you want to call it, is controlling our country and our lives. I say it's time to stop this. I say it's time to give peace and life a chance. I'm disgusted to see in these films these little kids being pulled out of rubble. I'm disgusted by seeing snipers in Israel kill Palestinian children playing. I can't allow myself to sit at home and watch football and forget about this. God didn't put me on this earth to keep my mouth shut, especially about this. I have great faith in God. That's why our ship didn't sink, in my opinion, is by the grace of God. Nobody else came to help us but one person, the higher power. Now, I've been in many churches that have agreed with me on this. And some believe it, some don't, but everybody has their own mind, and they're able to make up their own minds. So, with all that being said, you have to remember, this is not here to hate anybody. It's here to tell the truth. And by God, we're going to do it until the day I die or he dies or the rest of the guys die. In fact, unfortunately, we just lost another crew member aboard the USS Liberty, Barry Timmerman. He was a friend of mine. He died of cancer. Wonderful, wonderful young man. He was wounded aboard the ship. He got to live out part of his life, but not all of it, because a disease got him. And I can see there's enough folks in here, well, I'll be 70 here in a couple months, that the older you get, you're thinking, but, hey, man, I wouldn't mind another 10 or 15 or 20 years of this stuff. I can stay healthy. So that's what I'm thinking about, staying healthy and getting the word out to people like you. And I know other people have different opinions, but the bulk of people that have gone against us, unfortunately, are the people that support Israel rather than their own country, the United States of America. I'm not grouping all of them together. I'm saying the majority of the people that support the Zionist state of Israel do not want this story to come out. That's why there's never been a movie made about it. Never. And that is our goal, is to get a visual movie and reading this book and understanding how many lives were lost just by this rocket hole, just by this one single rocket hole. In the mess decks, men were lined up moaning and groaning. You couldn't walk around anywhere of the ship that there wasn't a person hurt. I'll never forget a man named Quintero. He had a .50 caliber go right through the top of his head. The gray matter was, you could see his brains. And he was awake. And he said, "Tourney, could you do me a favor?" I says, "Yeah, Quintero, what do you need? Anything, I'll help you." He said, "Well, I'm missing my thumb. You think you could go find it for me?" So I looked, but I went back to him and said, "Man, it's nowhere to be found. They'll build you a new one. Don't worry about it." But all the wounded got airlifted to the USS America the following day, 18 hours after the attack started, when they could have been there in 15 or 20 minutes. They left us out there to sink and die and blame it on the Arab state. There were nuclear aircraft in the air. They were having a nuclear drill on the America and the Saratoga and their support groups, Davis, Massey, Popco, all the rest of them. But if our ship goes to the bottom, which LBJ and McNamara wanted and Admiral John McCain wanted, he was the commander of Europe forces, so the supreme commander, which that command was taken away from him by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So a very, very small group of people would know about it. I'll end with this. Admiral Isaac Kidd came aboard our ship several days after the attack, even before we hit port. We had no idea where we were going. The ship had a 40 by 40 foot hole in it. We thought we were going to roll over. Napalm was burning us up. Over 850 cannon rocket holes in the ship. And the Israelis circling our ship, trying to kill everybody they could. We only had 3 life rafts left, and I cut one over myself. Whoever put the other 2 life rafts over, I don't know, but we had enough life rafts on that ship for 294 souls, and we had 3 left. As they went into the water, the Israeli torpedo boats sunk them. They took one aboard the craft and it's somewhere in Israel in it as a trophy to their kill. It's in a museum. They're very proud of what they did to the crewmen and to the United States of America. Admiral Moore, I'll go back, Admiral Moore came aboard our ship a few days, excuse me, not Admiral Moore, but Admiral Isaac Kidd and his surrogate, Ward Boston. And they got us in small groups. I happened to be in one of the smaller groups in sick bay. He came in and took off his stars. He threw them on the table, something similar to this, except it was stainless steel, and it rang out like a big bell. And he says, I'm going to talk to you guys just like I'm your dad. I'm not an admiral anymore. I'm just like you. But what I got to know is what you saw and what you did and what you heard and so on and so forth. And we felt relieved. We felt, you know, hey, our Savior's here, because he wanted to get down to the truth. We told him everything. I was one of the last guys he talked to because I was in damage control. I was all over the ship, from the bridge to the bow to the stern, everywhere. And I kept that role till we brought her into Malta. So and that was with the skeleton crew, by the way. But Admiral Kidd got all of our information, which we thought was heartfelt, that he was going to keep and he was going to make this right. When we all told him what had happened, he put back on his stars and he got beat red. Red as a beet. And he said, any one of you SOBs ever breathe a word about this to anybody, including your families, your fellow shipmates, especially the media, anybody, I'm going to make sure you, Tourney, end up in the penitentiary or worse. And everybody knew what that meant. They were going to kill us. Now, I didn't say anything about the USS Liberty for 20 years. I completely forgot about it. I even forgot the date. When I married my second wife, there was an article that came out in the paper about the Liberty, and the whole world had lifted off my shoulders because somebody off that ship broke those orders and wrote this letter. Then I was hooked because I was, to be very honest with you, I was extremely hurt and pissed off at this crime. So now, in this great nation we have of freedom of speech, I'm here to utilize that freedom of speech to remember my dead shipmates, to remember the crew that were wounded, to remember the men that had died since then from their wounds, and of course their families, what they had to suffer through because they never knew what happened. There's so many different caveats to this. I could go on and on and on, but I won't because we're just, you know, short on time, and I want to do exactly what I was told to do. And folks, that's one of the reasons that this book is so important, to make this movie. I'm not getting a penny out of this book. Neither is Dave. I'm the author. We worked a year on this book to make darn sure it was bulletproof, and it is. As I said before, out of all the books that have been written, and there's probably 7 or 8, and one of mine is what I saw that day. I made some errors in it, but we cleaned them up. So that's what we're here for, is to sell this book, take donations, have you, if you've got it in your heart, to open up your hearts and your wallets to make this dream come true of making a feature film about the USS Liberty. It's not going to go on the big screen. We're not that ignorant to figure it is. But that doesn't preclude us from Netflix, HBO, or other outlets, even the internet. You know, the internet's pretty cool, and we can utilize that before they shut it down, shut free speech down. So my part is pretty much done here, other than to say that I'm very thankful to be alive, and I'm very thankful that you people took the time and gave me the great honor of addressing you and getting to know you. And I hope you understand where I'm coming from. And I speak for all the crew. Like I said, I'm the former three-time president, the only three-time president of the USS Liberty. So that gives you some idea that the surviving crew believes in me, and I believe in you. God bless you.
Thanks, Phil. Willard, would it be all right, you think, if we showed the video now? Yeah, the trailer, and then after the trailer, if anybody wants to come up here, right behind us here are some boxes with the books, as I'm going to be reading some portions from it. If you want to follow along, you're more than welcome to grab it. And this is the donation trailer for the movie that we plan on making. And this was filmed in Tampa, Florida, aboard the SS American Victory, which is one of only 3 Victory ships left in the United States. There are about 550 built to ferry cargo during World War II because of the great losses the ships experienced with the German U-boats. So there are 3 left in the United States. They're museums. This is one in Tampa. It's the SS American Victory. This is the type of ship that the Liberty was converted from. So the Liberty was a World War II cargo ship. And the other 2 are in California, somewhere in California. I can't remember right now, but we contacted the administrators of this ship and told them what we wanted to do, and they said, sure, come on board. And several Liberty survivors flew out, and we drove out. I'm from Florida now, from the Panhandle, and we drove out from the Panhandle to Tampa, about 425 miles. And Phil was there, and you'll see the other folks in there, and we had a cameraman come out, and we filmed this trailer. It's only about, geez, it's not going to last as long as what I'm saying, probably. But the purpose of it is to educate people about what we want to do in the movie. And this was done in February. And so, as Phil said, we worked on this book for about a year, every day on the phone. I don't think a day went by when we didn't talk. Yeah, every day, a couple of times a day, making sure that it was factual, 100% factual. So let's take a look at this. Should we shut the lights or leave them on? Or okay.
Next summer, June 2017, marks the 50th anniversary of Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. In order to honor our fallen brothers and to spread the word about our search for answers, a group of veterans of the USS Liberty, in association with a passionate group of filmmakers, are in pre-production on a feature film about the attack and the aftermath.
We are planning to release this film to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this event.
We're going to use the latest filmmaking technology and special effects to bring our story to life in a way never before possible. A feature film based on the attack on the USS Liberty. And the veterans' search for truth is finally being made.
But we need your help to produce this important independent film.
And make this movie as spectacular as possible. Your donation will enable us to recreate our story with blockbuster production provided on the big screen.
Our story has never been told like this before.
Most Americans don't know about the USS Liberty. By creating a major motion picture, we believe the story of the Liberty will reach millions of people in a way never before possible. Help us tell our story of survival and the search for answers. Donate to the USS Liberty Film Project today.
This is the last opportunity for Liberty survivors to accomplish this extraordinary task.
Help us tell our story. Visit USSLibertyMovie.com and support the fundraising effort. We veterans of the USS Liberty thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Willard. So might as well get up and stretch a little bit, and if anybody wants to grab some books, they're right over here. And then once everybody does or doesn't, then we'll continue. We're going to go over that. I said we'll go over that later on. They're a lot of money. Well, this is just to follow along if you want to, because I'm going to be reading from it. You will be able to purchase them later on if you'd like.
Okay, so we'll wait until we take
No, if you want to take the book, no, we're not buying them now. I mean, if you want to take the book, go back to your seat, because I'm going to be reading from it if you want to follow along. Yeah.
They also need a book.
Just the one thing that's confusing me that I don't understand is this family got a flag right ahead. Obviously, they knew it was our. Why did they do that? I know the Six-Day War was going on, but why did they do that, and why did the U.S. give them frequencies?
Oh,
okay.
Afterwards, bring that up and I'll answer.
Okay.
Yes.
Greg Felton called me yesterday, so I should say hi. I mean, it's good to meet you too. Thank you for doing this and for hanging out together to this long drive.
No.
Look forward to doing this.
Thanks for showing up. That's great. Well, you're gonna be here later on. You're gonna hang out afterwards.
Let's roll it, Dave. Go ahead.
Okay. All right, so I guess we'll continue. Everybody's ready? All right, get your heads out of that book. Well, as you heard from Charles, my name's Dave Gahary, and he wanted to know more about me, that father of three thing. I didn't say, hey, tell him I'm father. And I was born and raised in New Jersey. It's not my fault. And I went in the Navy when I was 19. And I served aboard the USS Skate, which was does anybody know about the USS Skate? Raise your hand if you heard of the USS Skate. Yeah. Well, anyway, the Skate was a submarine. It was a fast attack submarine. And wait, before I go into that, I just wanted to say thank you to Willard and Armin and everybody else. We had a great time. They took us out to dinner and to a beautiful restaurant where we were almost struck by lightning and swept up by a tornado. It was still nice, though. But really, seriously, thank you for that. And I'm not really that great with names, but Michelle, Bernadette, Reinhardt, Sue, Iris, and Rita, thank you for organizing this. And so the USS Skate was the third built nuclear submarine in the United States Navy. The first was the Nautilus, and then and that's pretty well known. I guess there's movies made about that. And then the Seawolf, and then the Skate. The keel was laid in 1955, and the Skate was its own class of submarine and had 2 screws. And its slogan was 2 screws are better than 1. So I didn't make it up. And I served on board the Skate as an electrician, and I was trained, I was a nuclear trained electrician. So, of course, most of the subs now are nuclear powered. And so our job was basically, we were in the back part of the ship, the aft part of the ship, or the boat, sorry. Subs are called boats, not ships. And the forward part of the ship were different guys, similar to Phil's position there on the Liberty. As he said, about two-thirds of the crew of almost 300 were spies. And so they were in the aft part of the ship, and they were just gathering information. The Liberty at the time was the most sophisticated seaborne intelligence platform in the world. So, you know, we have planes, remember AWACS, those AWACS planes, we have those, and other ways to intercept electronic messages, but the Liberty would just slowly go back and forth. Of course, their area of duty was the west coast of Africa. So they would go from Monrovia all the way down to Cape Town, South Africa, and just maybe go a few knots, which is about, a knot is about a mile per hour. I think it's something like 1.15 miles per hour. And they would just go back and forth and just pick up messages. The reason they were on the west coast of Africa was because of the Chinese and the Russians, so, or the Soviets at the time. And so that was their job, just intercept messages, and they were pretty good at it. And so 2/3 of the crew, about 200 were spies, and the other third of the crew were what's called the ship's company, the ship's crew, and their job was to run the ship, make the ship as comfortable as possible for the spies. So our job on the sub was to propel the ship forward, and we were the nukes. We were like the CTs on the Liberty, and then the forward part of the submarine, forward of the reactor compartment, were the people who did everything that had to be done to run the ship. We just made the power in the nuclear reactor, and everybody else did what they had to do. And so I went in the Navy in 1980. So when the Liberty was attacked in 1967, I was 7, in a couple of weeks. And I went in when I was 19, before my 20th birthday, and the whole time I was in the Navy for 8 years, I didn't know anything about the Liberty. And it wasn't until, I would say about 2007, maybe 2006, so about 10 years ago, that I first heard about the Liberty. So prior to this event, by a show of hands, how many of you have heard about the USS Liberty prior to this event? Well, that's pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, really good. That's not like a normal cross-section of people. If you walked across the United States and knocked on doors, and hardly anybody would know. So when I found out about the Liberty, being in the Navy, I couldn't believe it, as many people couldn't believe, especially people in the military. And I said, this really can't be true. I ordered a book on the Liberty, the first book on the Liberty, The Assault on the Liberty, by someone who was on board the Liberty, Jim Ennis. Has anybody heard of that book at all, The Assault on the Liberty? Okay. Jim Ennis was an officer on board the Liberty, and he was injured, and he was air evacuated off the next day. So his book was written with the eyewitness testimony of people who were on board there. So he wasn't actually on there. But the book, nonetheless, was very good, and it broke the silence about the Liberty, which we would, I guess, ask the question, why would there ever be silence about the Liberty? Does anybody have any idea why so few people know about the Liberty? Because it was Israel?
Well, the media is controlled by Zion. I mean, it's a fact. I mean, you know, I grew up with a friend of mine from school, became president of CBS Network News, a Zionist Jew. He told me. I mean, he told me at lunch.
Right. Anybody else? Sir? You're curious about my opinion? Okay. Well, I'm not supposed to have an opinion. We don't have opinions. Read the book and decide. The book was written like that. You can just read the facts, and we agonized over the facts, and we presented it in such a way that we did not put anything in the book that was not corroborated. And there's a lot of stuff about the Liberty that we heard about and is just not true. So these are just facts. Anybody else have an idea about why the Liberty story is so unknown to the world? Right, well that's one, that's correct.
Well, could it be that the military was just so embarrassed about it, like some of the tests that were done on soldiers during World War II, that this was an event that was a supreme embarrassment, that they just tried to squash it? And therefore, because, you know, we allowed such a loss of life of our, you know, our precious soldiers, that, do you think they just hid it because of that?
Well, no, because we knew that Israel knew that they were attacking the USS Liberty, and we could have gotten help there in 15 minutes, like Phil said, so they waited 18 hours. So that's not it. Yes, sir?
Well, the U.S. has been involved for a hell of a long time in covert operations.
Could you use the mic or speak up?
Okay. The U.S. has been involved for a long, long time.
Oh, do you think maybe it would be okay if you stood?
I'm glad to stand.
Oh, does this mic work here?
Yeah.
Oh, that mic over there?
Right here works, yeah, right here.
Thanks.
You found it.
Is this the microphone?
Yes.
Okay, can you hear me now? All right. I think, well, we know that the United States has been involved in covert operations all around the world for a long, long time. And that this is just one more example of the quiet powers that actually run our country and what they do to us as we're trying to live our lives and trying to make the best out of what we have here. And we can speculate on who those powers are, but if you look around to the places that we've stuck our noses and the places where we've made such big messes, the creation of the CIA wasn't the beginning of the U.S. being stupid about how we live our lives and try and impose our interests on the rest of the world and what tools we're willing to use, including our soldiers.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We remember the USS Pueblo, and it was, I assume, the sister ship, the Liberty, and it was very easy for the U.S. government and the media to promote what happened to the Pueblo because it was kidnapped by an enemy. So the media talked about the Pueblo, and it was able to put aside the whole thing with USS Liberty.
Could I answer that, Dave?
Is his mic on, Willard?
That is a very, very good question. And I knew Captain Booker, the commander of that ship. And I had talked to him several times, and he wrote a great book. It was called Butcher's Story, or Booker's Story. And when he talked to me, he says, Phil, if I would have known about the USS Liberty, and his ship was captured, I think a month and a half after the Liberty event. I don't like to call it an incident. An incident is like when you rub shoulders with somebody and say, oh, I apologize. That's an incident. But Captain Booker had no intention of giving up his ship. He was promised help by the USS, by the United States government. It never got there. But he also added, if I would have known about the USS Liberty, I would have never been where I was at. I would have been hundreds of miles out to sea. So those men that spent those 11 months in deplorable, horrible conditions would have never happened. But because this captain of this spy ship never heard about the USS Liberty, gives you an in-depth insight of the cover-up and how deep it went, not just throughout our government, but throughout our military. They didn't know the truth. How could they? The only way. They didn't know the ramifications either. Absolutely. And the ramifications from 1967 are greater now than they ever were during the 6-Day War. Because it is a part of history that has taken a group of people and put them in behind walls, not able to do their jobs, not able to grow their fruits, not able to raise their children, not able to drink good water, not able to do anything other than to be under the Zionist thumb of Israel, namely this prime minister right now, Benjamin Netanyahu, who also said that meeting with the boss, at this point, there would be no talks about no more settlements or the boundaries which bound them by UN resolution, I believe it was 221, that Israel go back to the 67 borders. When they said no, they basically gave the middle finger to the world. And that's the way it stands today. So it's getting worse instead of better.
And we just voted to send them a bunch more money for weapons.
Yes, ma'am. $11 million a day they get from Israel. Your money, your tax money.
Yes.
You have no say-so where it goes. And you know that $11 million a day would do a heck of a lot for just a week in this beautiful town you have called Albuquerque. It would feed a lot of hungry kids, and there are a lot of hungry kids.
Yeah, they're a well-off country. We could use it here.
Absolutely. We need the money here. We're broke.
Yeah.
And we can't continue on the path we're going.
My theory is that it seems like most wars are triggered by an incident which turns out to be trumped up or false. And that you said yourselves they wanted to blame it on the Arabs so they could justify what they were doing to them. And it sounds like that's what was happening, because it seems really strange that a military would have unmarked planes and things like that. Isn't that unusual?
That is extremely unusual.
Yeah.
That is a act of war in itself. They wanted to sink us fast, blame it on the Arab state, Cairo, and They wanted us to go to the bottom. Now, if we go to the bottom, think about it. You got 294 American souls sunk by the Arabs. Do you think the American government, the American people would be crying out for blood?
No. I noticed in the book, I just looked at it briefly, that Johnson was told about this and anticipated it, but I couldn't see that they said that he knew that it was going to be an American ship that was hit. Just there was supposed to be an incident that triggered it. Did he know that this is what they were going to do?
In my view,
And he was okay with it?
he was absolutely okay with it. In fact, Dave knows more about the history of LBJ than I do, but what I've learned in books and talking to Dave, he surrounded himself with very hardcore Jews that were only obliged to the protection and the expansion of the Zionist state.
Mm.
And that's what took place in 1967.
How about oil?
Oil, that had a lot of it does, absolutely. And if we go to the bottom, the footprint in the Middle East would be completely different than it is now. Israel would have all the land, all the country, all the oil, everything they ever wanted if our ship goes to the bottom.
No, but we have all the oil. We take the yards and take the oil.
Well, we'd be buying it from Israel. That's my belief.
There's some disagreement about that, about whether or not it was what they call a false flag, as I'm sure everybody knows that term, that that Israel would sink the Liberty and then blame it on Egypt, which wasn't called Egypt back then, it was the United Arab Republic, and then the United States would drop a nuclear bomb on Cairo. I don't think that that was the case. My studies of it, I don't think that it was designed for that. There are, like the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which Johnson admitted it was like. Of course, even as early as that, most Americans believed their president would never lie to them. It was that incident that really turned Americans against, I mean, because to believe that your president, you know, in the image of George Washington, would lie to the American people. And even the media, now they're wising up, but I, from my research, I don't think that that was the case. But
as we consider the question that you asked about, you know, why this incident occurred, and you know, how can we perceive that it could have been allowed? I want everybody to consider the government's story on 9/11.
the government's conspiracy theory on 9/11, because by definition it is a conspiracy theory because certain people conspired. Yes?
Well, I think it's weird that Johnson went along with all this, because by that time he had decided not to run for another term in office.
No. He still...
He was finishing up his first term, but he had already...
But he hadn't decided that he was not...
He had finished up Kennedy's term, and then he had his own term that he was elected, and then in '68 he was could have run again.
Right.
But by then he had decided not to.
By the time the Liberty was attacked, he had not decided.
He hadn't announced it.
Right. Well, he hadn't decided.
Oh.
As Phil said, President Johnson was a Christian Zionist, and he wasn't the first president to understand the power that Israel had in the domestic arena. Kennedy was. And as you'll read in the book, whoever gets the book, Johnson was speaking to an Israeli official, and he said, about after Kennedy was slaughtered in broad daylight, and he said, "You've lost a good friend of Israel." He said, "But you've got a better one."
Well, I think in my lifetime we haven't had a president that wasn't a good friend of Israel.
Well, it started with Johnson. I mean, Truman, Eisenhower, FDR actually made an Israeli ambassador wait in D.C. for like a month to see him, and he never saw him. Okay.
I don't think this is new. There's a book several decades ago called The First Casualty of War.
Right. Oh, did you want to get up at the microphone there? Oh.
But the first casualty of war is the truth.
Yes.
This, you said George Washington, I'm sure.
Can't hear you.
Everyone tell everybody the truth.
Well, he's saying the first casualty of war is the truth, but he's saying that since George Washington, but the point is that in the modern era, most Americans, I think it's agreed upon that most Americans didn't believe that their president would ever lie to them. And so it wasn't until Johnson lied about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which cost the lives of almost 60,000 Americans, not counting, of course, all those innocent civilians that are still suffering to this day because of Agent Orange. There's Vietnamese babies being born with no stomachs, no arms, no anuses. It's horrible what this stuff did. And Kennedy actually, on the children of, yes. So, sir, did you want to say something before you? Did you want to get up to the microphone, or I? Okay. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
I just wondered, number one, has there been a congressional investigation of this event? And then number two, was there a smaller vessel that could have fulfilled these purposes if there was a plan so that they couldn't take down a smaller vessel?
Yes.
Can you expound?
Sure. The USNS Private Jose Valdez was another spy ship. USNS means it's not a commissioned Navy vessel. It was run by civilians, and they were just coming off a deployment, so they could have done it. They were closer by, but they figured, well, let's take the Liberty from West Africa, bring it up to Rota, Spain, drop off some linguists, pick up some Arab linguists, and then go down to the Mediterranean in international waters off the coast of the Egyptian-controlled Gaza Strip. So yes, there could have been.
No, but could there have been a smaller vessel that the Israelis attacked and fulfill the same purpose and actually sink it?
What was the purpose?
Well, it's sort of been that.
Yeah, that probably wasn't it. You're asking. You probably want to know why did they do it?
Why did they choose the Liberty when if there was another vessel?
There wasn't another vessel there. Yeah, the vessel could have been there in the place. The Liberty was when the Liberty was steaming towards the Mediterranean. It was the only one. They knew it. They had identified the Liberty days before.
And its capabilities.
They knew everything about it. They looked in James' fighting ship. They knew everything about the Liberty.
And no investigation yet?
No.
Why don't you get one?
That's what we're working on.
But let's have one more comment, and then are you going to read?
Yes.
So my comment is small, but you'd mentioned the Gulf of Tonkin incident as telling us all about Johnson's lying to the public. I was 18 in '67. I was very curious about the war in Vietnam and all that, and I never did serve. But that incident doesn't stand out particularly. I think what really stood out is sort of the drip, drip, drip of things that didn't match what the government was telling us, day by day. A lot of us were 18 and reading the newspaper, and we would read something and then a while later realize it's not true, it's not turning out that way, and it just built up that way. Whereas, the Gulf of Tonkin thing, maybe we didn't even know about it then. And anyway, it wasn't a big deal to me. It was really sort of the Walter Cronkite thing, where he was educating us every night I wasn't really watching that every night, but you know, it was building up in every newspaper in the country.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, yeah. No, you could take your time. I mean, we have time, right? Yeah. Did you want to use the microphone? Yeah. Thank you for your comment, by the way. And before I wasn't recommending that he would bump out the poor guy who was waiting at the microphone. I just didn't know. He was standing up. That's all good.
I wanted to tell the people here that the cameraman Mike Swick and myself and the gentleman that was here before had to leave. We were all co-producers on 2 public access TV programs here in Albuquerque. We ran for several years, and we covered. I dedicated 2 shows to the Liberty. We had clips from the loss of Liberty, I believe that was, yeah. So, and we talked about it, and we took in phone calls from around the town. We also covered things like the September 11th false flag. I was there. I saw those buildings built. I went downtown and I saw them go up, and I saw them go down, and I went down there in medical capacity, and I spent several days down there. They were blown to smithereens. It was actually 7 buildings all in all. There were two towers, number 7 and 2, 4, 5, 6. They were all demolished. So ever since that occurred, I became very interested in the activities of this government. And I went down the rabbit hole. And one after another after another. A man named James Fetzer, who founded Scholars for 9/11 Truth, I emailed him, told him that I was down there and I wanted to pursue this. This is back in 2003. He emailed me back and he said, Bob, he says, we have a government at war with its own people. And what you described tonight with Johnson and McNamara and the whole crew is high treason. And I think, and this has been going on now for the last 50 years, if not more, and it continues today. And we have a shadow government run by people who need to be arrested, tried, and hung. And that's my humble opinion. Thanks.
Can't argue with that. Can't argue with that at all, and that's the truth. Yeah. Where did it all go wrong? Who knows? You know, a lot of it has to do with, believe it or not, it goes back to 1803 to judicial review in the Supreme Court. I don't know. But what's that? I mean, there's a lot of things, and I'm a right, exactly. That was it. Yeah, that's what really started things. So it really began a while ago. Yeah, yes, I will. But this is more important than the reading. Yes, sir.
So thank you for being here. I greatly appreciate it. I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is associated.
Can you move closer, Ryan?
I'm terribly sorry. One is associated with the Liberty. There's an active story associated with the Golden Heights, that Israel was invading the Golden Heights. Liberty was a spy ship, and there was a conflict within the American government about Israel doing that. Can you comment on that and its correlation with the sinking of the Liberty?
Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And the second question was associated with the Pueblo. Now, yeah, I mean, it's fairly well known that throughout the 1980s that there was information that was being given to the Soviets, and that the Pueblo was actually attacked for hardware, for cyber hardware. Can you comment on that as well?
Okay, sure. Well, I can't really comment on the Pueblo. I've been buried in the Liberty for the past year pretty heavily, and the Pueblo really doesn't, except for what Phil mentioned, doesn't really touch upon the Liberty other than the fact that if the Liberty story would have been exposed, then 9/11, not just the Pueblo, 9/11 might not have happened. The argument could be made that that's the case. As far as what happened in '67, the 6-Day War, which went from June 5th to June 10th in 1967, on May 27th, and this is in the book, On May 27th, the United States and the Soviet Union were swinging a deal. The Russians said, you get Israel to back off, because we know they're going on a land grab. If you do that, we'll pull back the Viet Cong in Vietnam. And they did. There was a lull in the fighting. None of the captured media reported on it. But yeah, that's what happened. So the US and the Soviet Union knew that Israel was going for the land grab. Israel lied flat out over and over and over again about the Egyptians massing on their border and wanting to invade. That's why all the air forces of the United Arab Republic, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria were taken out in 80 minutes because they weren't planning on attacking. So the whole purpose of the Six-Day War was to illegally grab this land. Some think it's because of oil. It probably is. I think it's a long-range plan. And because of what happened to the Liberty, because if the Liberty was allowed to get the intelligence that they acquired, it would go right to the NSA, and that might be publicized, and it would be revealed what Israel did to their neighbors, how it was a preemptive strike on the United Arab Republic, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan, how they did it just to grab land, how they slaughtered hundreds and hundreds of Egyptian POWs in the desert. They murdered them with guns, like the Nazis supposedly did, and then they made the ones that were alive dig the holes to put them in, and then they did the same thing to them. Shot them on the edge, right. If that information got out, Israel would not get away with it. But because Israel was allowed and rewarded for premeditated, cold-blooded murder on the high seas, we are in the position we are in today. Because Israel can murder anybody they want, and the United States, the puppet of Israel, will stand up in the United Nations and veto any resolution that might call for Israel to honor international law or humane norms. They don't have to. So that's what Phil was saying. They could take their sniper rifles and they could murder Palestinian children anytime they want. So yeah, the Liberty impacts our world today. If we open up the book and go to page 261. I'm sorry. Oh, I apologize. Oh,
I just had a short comment.
I apologize. Thank you.
It took 50 years for the truth to come out about this. And so if it takes 50 years for the truth to come out about 9/11, I'm not going to be around. I never will find out what happened.
Yeah, you're right. And we need people to wake up about 9/11, especially Building 7, which had one fire in an office. And then Larry Silverstein, who took over the lease of the World Trade Center, admitted on film in a documentary, America Rebuilds, PBS, that they demolished the building. And on a side note, I had a friend who also built the building, and I told him about that, and he said he didn't believe me. He asked one of his contacts in the FBI, and he said, yes, Richie, the building was wired to be demolished months and months before.
I think I need to interrupt here. Veterans for Peace is the co-sponsor of tonight's event, and we agreed to be a co-sponsor because we thought the story of the USS Liberty should be told. But we don't feel that we should be speculating about what this means for other things that have happened over the years, that there are conspiracy theories about that because of U.S. Liberty, therefore 9/11, or other things. We don't make that connection. So I want to make it clear that Veterans for Peace does not make that connection. But we do know that this happened to the Liberty. We think it's important that that story be told, but we're not speculating as to what that how that connects to other things.
And I know you want to get to your book. I'll make it.
No, please.
I can make it short. I am really concerned, and I agree with both of you. The U.S. is a puppet of Israel, and my concern is that how do we get control and way of our country back and break that connection with Israel? I think it has ruined our Mideast policy because one is because of the Palestinians, and obviously I'm sure we're all anti-Trump people, but I am not crazy about Hillary Clinton, and when she made that comment equating anti-Semitism with the BDS movement, I was very disturbed. The BDS movement was really effective with South Africa under apartheid, and I think it could very well be effective today. And I just talked to someone a couple of hours ago, a young woman for Jewish Students for Peace at UNM, and she was saying, she's a Muslim woman, a Palestinian, and she was saying how that with Israel, that they can't, BDS can't get a hold at the UNM campus because of all the Jewish students that are taking what Hillary Clinton had said and really fighting back. So they can't coalesce for the BDS movement. We have to somehow break this stranglehold that they've got on us. And as Michelle had mentioned, now it's 38 billion over 10 years. They're getting 0.8 billion more a year. How do we do this? How do we reclaim kind of our sovereignty?
As Charles just said, let's concentrate tonight just on the USS Liberty.
Yeah, I was going to
There are lots and lots, we could spend hours and hours on other issues, but we're here tonight because we've got two super people to talk about the Liberty, and let's confine our comments to the Liberty.
But the Liberty is involved with Israel. I mean, that's the direct connection. Israel attacked the Liberty.
I agree, and it's all connected, but tonight we're going to concentrate on the USS Liberty. Please.
I don't get it.
The Liberty, as we know, weighs heavily on all of these topics. If you don't want to, if the leadership here doesn't want to delve into those areas, then that's fine. But the way that I do things is I talk about everything. So if you want to concentrate just on the Liberty, how do we break the stranglehold? Okay, we've thought about that.
Thank you.
My microphone off? Speak louder. Can you hear me? Okay. The way that we think. Okay. We think, because it's like we were talking about before, 1803, Marbury versus Madison. We think that the way to break this or get the country back, maybe, is with this Liberty story. So, if people can buy the book, and the book exists simply to fund the movie. If people will buy the book, read the book, if we can make the movie, because there have been 2 attempts to make a movie about the Liberty. Is anybody aware of that? Raise your hand if you knew about that. Okay. Both of those people who tried to make the Liberty are dead. One of them supposedly killed himself, and the other supposedly had a 1-car crash. So they don't want this story told. And if you open up the book, right in the foreword actually, which is on, right before page 1, it says there at the bottom, right in the middle actually, it says, we all know that if those in charge of the mainstream media, whether the print media, the big book publishing houses, the television networks, or the major movie studios, wanted you to know about the Liberty, you would already know. They don't want this story told, not today, not tomorrow, and not ever, but we do. And we hope you do too. The last chapter of this book will show you how to help us get this story onto the big screen, whether it's a silver screen, HBO, Netflix, or even the lowly internet. Either way, let's get it done, if for nothing else than for the remaining Liberty survivors who have been harassed, abused, accused, and berated, all for wanting to tell anyone they could about what happened that clear, sunny day in June, almost a half-century ago. We had a spirited discussion last night at dinner. And on that same page, it says that why we chose the title Erasing the Liberty, because Phil mentioned, or he used the word erase several times, and I thought that that was perfect, because that's what they're literally erasing history. How dare they? We decided that wasn't going to happen. And it says here it was the perfect title because that was exactly what they were trying to do. They being those people, mostly American Jews, who, through their ceaseless manipulation to drown out any attempt to introduce the story of the Liberty, had effectively erased the history of this ship from the pages of time. This had to end, we both agreed. So someone had said, well, you said American, all American Jews. And I said, no, I didn't say that. We didn't say that. It says mostly American Jews. So if this circle represents all the American Jews in America, and this circle represents all of the people who want to keep the Liberty story buried forever, that little circle, almost 100% of them are American Jews. That's what I was saying. And that's a fact. After spending all the time I have on this, I would only speak with facts. And just let me finish this, Charles, because this is why this story's been buried. Because of the power of Zionists, the power of American Jews to silence this story. 50 years. Nobody knows about it. Look at the movies they make.
There are American Jews in this room that don't agree with it, though.
That's right. That's the point. If this is the circle of all American Jews, and this is the circle of American Jews who don't want you to know about the Liberty, obviously, most American Jews would want you to know about the Liberty. So the fact is that the percentage of people who don't want you to know about the Liberty, almost 100% of them are American Jews. Yes, that's true. That's why it's not 100%. But it's mostly, and there's reasons for that. But the fact of the matter is that's the case. That's where you'll hear the people get up and if you want to have, if you want to, yeah, there's people standing up. So go ahead, sir.
Okay. Yeah, I seen a couple of documentaries, watching Bob and those shows on 27 when we had that public access. But I understand. I don't understand why Johnson and that conspiracy part would not want to. Why they would cover it up? Why would they let Israel get away with it? I don't know that. But from the two documentaries that I did see on that public access, it was that this signals boat ship had picked up signals, and that was why it was hit by that. One of the documentaries said that was the reason that Israel attacked the ship, because they were there was a slaughter going on, and that they didn't want that out. And so that would kind of go with what you're talking about with the Russians and the United States getting together to talk about what they're going to do things, and Israel jumping in there and getting weird and doing their own thing. And but the other part. So there's two whys: why the United States and why the Israel's attacked. What about that thing about they were committing slaughter and everything in camps or something like that, and the signals were picking it up, and that's why Israel did it.
Yeah.
The other part I don't know. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's what I said before.
Well,
that,
that's what I
yeah,
was thinking you were saying that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were Egyptian POWs being slaughtered in the
It
desert.
was the Egyptian POWs.
Yes, Egyptian
Okay.
POWs, and they said, well, what are we going to do with all these POWs? Well, let's just...
Right. That part makes sense, but why did the United States,
Okay,
that
I'll
part
answer
I
that,
don't
and then I'll get to you guys. The reason, the most logical reason based on fact is that LBJ, as Phil mentioned, surrounded himself by American Jewish Zionists. Almost his entire team were American Jewish Zionists, and they supplied the bulk of the money. He was having an affair with a former Irgun terrorist named Matilda Krim. The Irgun was the terrorists during the Palestinian, before Israel became Israel, and I think they detonated about 60 bombs across the world so Israel could, Palestine could become Israel. So her husband was the head of United Artists, and he provided about 80% of the money to Johnson's re-election campaign. So Johnson was pretty much not just surrounded by these people who had an interest in making sure that nothing happened to Israel. Johnson was told by one of these American Jewish Zionists at a fundraiser that Israel was going to preemptively attack. Remember, Johnson was under siege because of the Vietnam War. 34 Americans were murdered viciously, obviously. When you have 850 rocket holes in a ship and somebody's trying to tell you it was a mistake, are you going to believe that? I mean, is anybody that stupid? No, of course not. By the way, they were told to stop counting at 850. There were over 5,000 holes in the ship. That's a pretty good mistake. So Johnson pretty much was tied. His hands were tied. They were telling him what to do. They had the money. There were, I don't want to get into too much about because I'm seeing faces and stuff and people who, don't want to hear this because it's uncomfortable for them. The facts aren't uncomfortable for me. They're the facts. Yes?
If I may, I promised.
He's going to put your mic on.
Oh, it's not on?
No, he's going to turn the power on.
Oh, okay. All right. Can you hear me? Okay. We promised the church and the elders that we would take care of this and be done by 9 o'clock. So that is our promise that we made to this gentleman back here, and we're going to keep it. Now, I saw two people standing up. If you please, we could answer your questions. And if anybody wants to buy my book, I encourage you to do it now to support this great endeavor of making a feature film that will ultimately change the course of history in the world as we see it. Please go ahead, sir.
So I've a...
What's that? Okay, yeah, let's just let these folks ask their questions there, Stan, and then I'll give you the cost of the book.
I have a suggestion. Between the book and the movie, there's something that could be done. There are sites like mondoweiss.net. I think they've had something about the USS Liberty. I don't remember anything in particular. But I think a lot of people go to that and they trust it. You know, Phil Weiss is
He's a nice guy.
very
Yeah.
interested in the truth.
Yes.
And so I think I encourage you. He's taken an article from me that was like 5 sentences. He called that an article one time. So I think you should consider that. Okay. And I think it was just today that there was mention of Israelis executing Palestinians in an unrelated thing on that site.
Thank you. Yeah, Mondo Weiss is a great site, and thank you. Well, hey, it's just us, and you. I mean, we're trying the best we can. Sir, do you have a question? Oh, come on up to the microphone. You don't look like you're happy there. You're making a face there. Go ahead. What is it? Move closer, though, this time, so everybody can hear you.
I agree with many of the things that you've said here,
right,
and so forth. But there are aspects of it that seem subjective in nature.
Like?
Hypothetical. Well, like you're going to start a war, United States, in the middle of Vietnam. Yeah, the United States is going to start a war, and they're going to use nuclear weapons in order to bomb.
I don't agree with that.
Yeah, well, so these are hypothetical. Why are you doing this? Why are you sinking this ship?
I don't agree with that. That's what I said. I don't know if you listened to me.
But that's the second
okay.
part of the question.
Right.
So the first, you don't agree with that, but there are parts here that I'm hearing that don't really add up. The reasons are not strong enough to really justify it. So,
what are they?
Well, another hypothetical.
Can you move a little closer?
Well, another hypothetical is that the United States government was fractionalized within itself. They had an executive branch and a congressional branch that wanted two different things, and this is a way for one branch to overcome the other branch. That is another subjective possibility. Have you thought of it?
Yes, and if you read the book, you'll find out that what Phil said was that the cover-up began instantaneously, and it was spearheaded by American Jewish senators and congressmen.
Why was that boat even there? If it was the United States government,
well, wait a second. You're saying why should that? That's what they said. They said, "What was that boat doing there?"
Yeah.
This is what it is. My 9-year-old son didn't understand. I said, "It's like this. Let's say somebody comes in and attacks you here, and I call the police. And the police are on their way over to help you. And the chief of police calls the squad car and says, turn around."
Yes.
That's the story of the Liberty. Forget about anything else. The Liberty was in international waters.
Yes. The United States is going to engage itself when it's already in Vietnam.
No, I didn't. No. You got to read the book.
Well, I'll read your book, but what I'm saying is that what's coming out here, I mean, there's a lot of things. I don't buy it.
There's really not a lot of things coming out. You don't know about it yet because you don't know about it yet.
I think I'll
when you read the book.
Yeah.
This is like I read a lot of books. Okay. What's that? Yeah, I will. I just want to explain this to you. I read a lot of books, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I will not interview the authors unless I read the book.
Yes.
Okay. Many authors have told me that that's the best interview they've ever had. But do you know a lot of people will attack books in the media? A lot of media will attack books without even reading them?
So I'm not attacking anybody.
I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying what I would suggest is read the book. And then you'll save your questions.
I definitely will.
Yeah.
I will definitely read your book. But what I'm saying is that you haven't, from an independent view, there's a lot of things I agree with, but I haven't heard a strong, decisive point.
Of what though? What are you caught up? Like what's your?
Somehow or another, the United States wanted to start a war, blame it on the Arabs.
No. I said that in my research, I don't believe that's true.
Okay.
So besides that,
then what was the purpose of their attack? Israel's attack.
Okay. There you go.
Yes.
And then we'll get into the book. Got it. As I said before, they were slaughtering, and this is a fact, Egyptian prisoners of war with their hands tied behind their back in the desert. Okay? Oh, yeah. The whole thing was a war crime. They were taking land that didn't belong to them. Just those two things, in and of themselves, is enough. But what do I think? Why do I think Israel did it? Because one of the main reasons is they wanted to tell the U.S. to back off. How many people in here, by show of hands, think that Israel is an ally of the United States? Raise your hands. That Israel is an ally of the U.S. Who thinks Israel is not an ally of the U.S.? Raise your hands. Right. Israel is not an ally of the U.S. The only way you can be an ally is through a mutual defense treaty. There is no mutual defense treaty. The U.S. wanted to have a mutual defense treaty, but Israel said, that's okay. Because if they did, they'd have to let the, right, exactly. So those are some of the reasons. But I would really, and I'm saying this from,
Sure.
you know, I'm,
Sure.
you know, I'm not saying this with any malice. I don't have any malice. I just wish you would read the book, and then you could take the knowledge that we gained, and we could give it.
I'd be happy to read the book.
Yes,
Certainly, sir.
and then you would
But
see.
do you also understand my point? I don't see where in this meeting.
And that's
you've
one of
made
the
a
reasons
strong
they did
statement
it, because they realized that if they did this, that the U.S.'s hands would be tied to do anything, because then they have to admit there was a spy ship and a lot of
Thank
things.
you, sir.
Let me tell them about the book. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So let me tell them about. You want to tell them about the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I just have.
Yes.
I just have one thing I want to say. I'm a former CT, communications or cryptologic technician. I was a Russian linguist. I was a spy. That was on the. I wasn't on the ship, obviously, but it was my job. I went in shortly after the Liberty. The story did go through the Naval Security Group, and that it was an accident was not believed within the group.
I know that.
That I can tell you for a fact, because I was there.
I will say one thing. Thank you for your service, by the way. The majority of men that were slaughtered that day were National Security Agency people, just like yourself, 25 of them, that stayed their ground at their duty station and didn't run out of there like a bunch of rats and gave their life up for it. For what? That's what this book tells you about.
For nothing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'm sorry that, you know, it's the event that we held in Denver, it was the same thing. People had a lot of questions, and we love to answer the questions, especially Phil and I, because we've been immersed in this, and, you know, we want to let people know about it, what we learned.
But let's keep our promise.
Yes. So, time's up. Sorry, we got to go. No. Okay. Well, the book is $25, and that website that Willard put up there, you could see the book and the prices of it. It's $25 for the book. If you want Phil to autograph it, it's $50. If you want him to inscribe it, it's $100. I know, it's true though. No, it's true. And yes, exactly. And the whole reason is to raise money for the film. So if we can't make the film, then we're going to give the money back, because why would we have the money? We don't need it. It's to make the movie. The good news is that since the book's come out last weekend, we've been approached because of a book review. We've been approached by people in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, and other people who have raised funds before. So we have people on board. We had them on before, but we're pretty heartened by this, and if we didn't think we would do it, could do it, we wouldn't do it. And like I said in Denver, we don't want to be away from our families. I have a 9-year-old son and a wife, and Phil has a wife and a son living nearby, and his wife took a spill at the post office where she works, and she needs help. So we're committed to pound the pavement and press the flesh and do what we have to do to get this movie done, because we feel that this is very important, that this story touches on a lot of things, and that if Americans got to see on the big screen the true history of what happened to this one ship that's been buried for almost half of a century, then we think that some good things would come of it, and maybe we wouldn't be in all these countries and all these people that are getting murdered for no reason, and these wars for no good reason. If we could tell the Liberty story, we think that we could help. Ultimately, we could help. And so, Oliver Stone is not interested in the Liberty.
Okay,
what's that? Oh, I don't know yet. But
Yeah, so Dave and Phil,
Yes.
I'd really, really like to thank you for coming tonight.
Thank you.
And let's give them a round.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is end the formal part of this evening, and if you want to stay here and ask questions and talk and have a discussion, let's continue that. But the formal part of the
formal
evening
part's
is
over. Will we still have the microphones?
Oh,
Wait,
no.
it doesn't matter.
Nope.
It doesn't matter. If anybody wants to get the book,
let's do that.
Come on up, and we could take cash and check and credit card or debit card. We're equipped to do all that. Oh, thank you. The check would be addressed to Erasing the Liberty, LLC. We think about $250,000.
God bless you.
Yep.